Lead and Empower Her with Dr. Julie Ducharme, the show that takes you around the world to share interviews with some of the most successful and relevant people on the planet. Hear their stories and get the most important business lessons they have learned on their road to success, and get exclusive advice on how to implement their success into your life and business. Lead and Empower Her with Dr. Julie Ducharme is brought to you by the Strategic Advisor Board and your host, Dr. Julie Ducharme.
Hi, I'm Dr. Julie Ducharme, back for another episode of She CEO Talks. And as always, I'm super excited to bring on women who are doing amazing things. And I was really blessed to actually meet Sherine Blackford through my dear friend Shelby and hear about a project that she's working on that is well worth our listen, and I think very impactful to many children to come. And the website is called lovingloic.org. And we're going to just dive in, Sherine, to your story and what's going on. And I feel you can tell it better than me trying to piece it together. But you didn't give me much of a description except your mom. So mom, and also a very successful lawyer from what I know as well. So I'd love for you to fill our listeners in on Loic's story, what you guys are working on, and we'll just kind of work through all the different aspects from there.
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for having me on and for, sharing our story and being willing to hear it and spread the word and the information. It's incredibly helpful to what we're trying to do at this stage as a new foundation. And so the background is Loic was born in October of 2020, and about through the first year of his life, we were starting to notice that he wasn't meeting a lot of the milestones that you kind of check off as you're watching your kids develop and grow. He wasn't babbling as much as other kids. He was having a lot of problems sleeping. We kind of just thought it was colic. He wasn't pulling himself up on furniture, and he wasn't walking. And so I started to explore that with our doctor's office and just kind of say, hey, can we look at this? What do you think this is? And we went through a number. We live in a small town in Bozeman, Montana. And so we started running him through a gamut of various tests to see what this could be. He went through an MRI. We did a lot of blood work. We did x-rays, some early genetic testing, which I thought was ruling out some of these major disorders that you think about that are super bad: Fragile X, Tay-Sachs, cystic fibrosis, things that could cause, that we know about, major developmental issues. All of those came back normal, and I was struggling to find a pediatric neurologist that I felt really comfortable with, that I felt, was really digging deep and looking for the information that could give us some answers. I found a neurologist that had ended up recently moving to Montana, and she had a lot of experience with kids dealing with cerebral palsy and some other ADHD and things like that. But she was very open to seeing us, and she had actually diagnosed Loic with what's called global apraxia, which is a disorder that, with intensive therapies, children generally grow and develop out of those issues. And so this was an answer, and I was super excited about it. One of the things that our genetic counselor said is, I think you should look further. I think it could be something more. And we went through exome testing and agreed to do that, primarily because I thought we had already ruled out all of the bad things. And what we came to ultimately learn through that process is that he has a disorder called PKAN, or Pantothenate Kinase-Associated Neurodegenerative Disorder. Sorry, it's a mouthful. And as we learned about that, what that really is it's a neurodegenerative disease that over time will take away his ability to walk, his ability to talk, and will put him on a feeding tube and ultimately end his life. A lot of the children with this disorder, if it's diagnosed early, they don't live past the age of 10. There's an atypical version where it onsets a little bit later in life, around adolescence, and some of those kids have a functioning part of the gene and are able to live a little bit longer. Some are living into their 50s or 60s. But this is a disease that has no treatment or cure. It's autosomal recessive, so my husband and I are both carriers. And it's not something that we would have ever known about until we found out that we had a child with it. It's not something that you can typically test for, even if you're doing, IVF or some of those other more intensive fertility treatments where you're looking for things to make sure that everything is safe.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's truly something that we would not have known about without this genetic testing. Or there are certain MRIs that can identify, signs in the brain that this disorder is affecting that child. But in Montana, we don't have those MRIs. So it was really pivotal for us to learn this information through the genetic test.
Yeah. Wow. And how long did it take in order for them to find out that Loic had this?
I think we agreed to take on the testing in March, and it was about 3 months before we got the results back.
Wow.
So it took a little bit of time to get the results back, and it was all passed on. There's a hospital here in Montana that's our only children's hospital, actually, that sends all the information in the test result or testing onto Mayo Clinic, and they do the workup and then send it back. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's one of those things that we're a small state. We have 500,000 people that are in our larger cities. And so seeing a disorder like this, and Loic's the only child. And so this was very much a surprise for them, and it's news that not many genetic counselors get to deliver.
Yeah.
PKAN actually affects 1 to 3 in 1 million children. So it's considered a very rare disorder. And it can often go misdiagnosed for a long period of time until a child is really in a very difficult or tragic state where they're losing their ability to walk or to eat. And then it comes about that this is ultimately what it is. So we are fortunate in the sense that we know early that this is what he has.
So you have been doing a lot of research, and you have what's called a gene therapy project that you're working on. Can you fill us in on what this project is?
Yes. So when we first learned about his diagnosis, it was very apparent there is no treatment, there is no cure. While they've been working on a variety of different drugs and putting those through clinical trials, they hadn't been successful with those. And while there is one that's actively being vetted by the FDA, we don't have it yet. And we don't know if it's going to work until we start giving it to our children. So one of the things that I really got focused on is there a gene therapy solution for this disorder? Or could we find someone that could create that? Because that's the ultimate cure for these children, is if we can find a way to effectively develop a gene therapy, it's a lifetime cure. I had asked the hospital that specializes in this disorder, and Oregon Health Sciences University has been the primary research group that has studied PKAN for the last 30 years. They're who identified the gene, identified and named the disorder, and have been working on various treatments since, I think, the early 90s. And what they had said about gene therapy is, for us, it's years away. We don't have the ability to move it through that process. So I spent the summer, I created a foundation, because as an attorney, there are certain things that I do know how to do, which is that. So I started a 501c3 with this hope of, we're going to raise money once we can find a research group to develop this cure. So we started the Loving Loic Foundation in June of 2023, which was about a month after his diagnosis. And then I spent the summer sending out letters to various researchers, to hospitals, to universities, to biotech companies, asking, are you able to take on this type of project, or do you know anyone that can? And in doing that, I had the expectation of either no one's going to respond, or maybe 1 to 3 people are going to respond. And luckily, there's a research group at the University of Massachusetts, CHAN, and they have a specific gene therapy treatment center and a lab that works on rare diseases. And that doctor responded right away. Her name is Dr. Heather Gray Edwards. And she said, I think this is something that we can take on. We set up a Zoom call, and I met with her and Dr. Miguel Sina Estevez. They work as a pair on a lot of these rare diseases, and they successfully carried through several to human clinical trials, including ones within the brain. And from the moment we met, it was very clear that they are just the salt of the earth folks who are there only to help children with various disorders or people with various disorders, and that they just wanted to help. What they let us know is it can take a long time if we don't have a lot of information about the disease. And so if it's something that we have to investigate and uncover, that's going to be a holdup for us. And it's also probably going to cost about $5 million to accomplish. So in speaking with them, it came about that, OHSU, Oregon Health Sciences University, knows about this disorder. They have a mouse model already. They have started a lot of research, and they could be a very great partner in this project if they would be willing to do that. And so what I did was set up a meeting between the two of them, which I was a bit nervous about, because two academic institutions coming together oftentimes can either work or it cannot work. And they met and they ended up hitting it off right away. And the Oregon Health Sciences University had actually had a researcher a couple of years ago who had started developing an AAV vector for gene therapy in PKAN, but she ended up taking a job elsewhere, and so the research had kind of stopped. And so they've been able to take what they have, and they've entered into agreements. I've entered into, as a foundation, different gifting agreements with each institution to make sure that all of the money that we are raising is dedicated to the Loving Loic PKAN Gene Therapy Fund that is going to go directly to this research and the development of this gene therapy, with the hope of I'd love it to be faster, but in 2 to 3 years, we have an effective gene therapy that can be delivered to these children. And so that is where we're at with our foundation.
Yeah. And that's, I just want to say that's impressive. What you said, a month after you found out, you started tracking down these researchers, and I most of them are on your website, if I'm correct, right? When I was looking through the website, so people can go on there and look at that. And what an amazing partnership you're creating. And I think you're also creating a process for other parents who are dealing with, rare disease types, right? To see that you mentioned academic institutions. Well, I've worked with a lot of them for a long time, and I agree with you. They don't always get together, but to see two get together for such an important cause it's inspiring to me, because really that's what it's about, right? I was a researcher for many years for a university, and the purest of being a researcher is just that we are researching a problem. Now, we're always told you can't research it with the idea to solve it, because that's not always realistic. But in this situation, to see that these researchers are moving in a direction with the idea to solve this is powerful, because that's what research is really all about, right? We're trying to solve that problem. So I love to hear that. Now, I know you're working to raise $5 million. And currently, from my understanding, you can go onto the website, which is lovingloic.org, and you can go and donate there. Is that correct?
That's right. So we have a donate button on our website, and you can donate directly to the Loving Loic Foundation, which is a 501c3, and it's a tax exempt organization, and you can make those contributions there. We have a Venmo account as well, which I don't have a link to on the website, but you can search and find us there as well. Mm-hmm. And so our goals for fundraising right now, we've broken it into essentially 2 phases. The research is going to span over a 4-phase period, which starts with additional mouse studies that are going to be conducted by OHSU. Dr. Susan Hayflick is the primary doctor there. She is the one who, she's really invested her entire life to studying this disorder and helping these children. And so we're really thankful to have her on that team. But they are initially working on the proof of concept for the mouse study and submitting the initial kind of project and timeline to the FDA this coming spring. And so with phase 1, and then part of phase 2 will be, another toxicology study in rodents to see if the AAV vector is effective. So the goal is that if we can raise an initial $1.5 million during 2024, that should carry us through, in large part, phase 1 and part of phase 2, which will then get us to the next steps in developing the vector for the human clinical trial, which will probably be taken over by the University of Massachusetts Chan, just because they've done several human clinical trials in gene therapy at their organization. And so that's where some of the major, our next 3.5 to 5 to get us to the $5 million mark is going to come in, just because the development of that vector can be so expensive. It has to be ultra sterile environment. The FDA is pretty tight on how that has to come together in order to introduce it into a human clinical trial.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I also want to touch base on the pecan families, or did you say it pecan? Wait, correct me. I'm saying it wrong.
Pecan,
Pecan.
pecan.
I did get it right.
Yes.
I know you have some families you've connected with. If there's a family that's watching this that does have this rare disorder, what's the best way for them to get connected with you?
Absolutely. Go to our website, lovingloic.org, and you can find all of my contact information there. You can also email me at info@lovingloic.org. My cell phone number, I'm happy to give that out. Reach out to me, text me, call me anytime, 406-360-4859. But we would love to hear from them as well. And part of what we're doing is helping to raise awareness about not only PKAN, but rare diseases generally. I think rare diseases, while our mission in finding this specific gene therapy cure for this disorder right now, it's going to translate to other rare diseases in the future. The more gene therapies that can be developed effectively for disorders like this, the easier it's going to be for the next one to come about. And so there's over 30 million people in the United States that are affected by a rare disease. And I think times that by 10 worldwide, right? And so it seems like it's a small number of folks that we're working to help stop this for right now, but really it's going to have a huge impact over time on how rare disease is treated and how gene therapies are implemented, assuming we can do it successfully, which with our doctors, I'm sure that we are going to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I connected with Paul Fraze, who, although a different rare disease, they had gone on that journey as well. And so I think it'd be great for not only those with this current disease, but like you said, other people have been on that journey, because it could be the process, right? Obviously, it's different for each disease, but as you mentioned, like the FDA and those processes and the cost and specific things like that, I think you're right. I think we can continue to grow and inspire and share and learn, and then create those processes for those parents who are dealing with these rare diseases. And I mean, the technology, I think, is moving in an amazing direction, which is really transforming some of the things in our health world. And so I am very optimistic that you guys are going to do some amazing work here. And so we will be putting the donate link. We'll put all the info that you said, we'll also put in links. So for those of you who might be working out right now, you're in the store. I had one woman call me one day and say she was listening to our podcast crying in the meat section, and she needed more info. So don't worry. We will make sure that all of that info is in there. Obviously, you guys can always message me if you're trying to get in touch with Sherine too, and I can make that connect. But take time to go to the website, watch the video, which is very informational and touching, and see how you can make a difference. I think you would agree with me, Sherine. It doesn't matter. Sometimes people think, oh, well, all I can give is $100. That's $100. It doesn't, you don't have to give a huge amount to give. And I think the other thing is, Sherine, are you in need or of anyone to help assist in what you're doing in the organization? Any volunteers that can help make the load lighter for you guys?
Absolutely. As I mentioned, I'm an attorney by trade and I'm a litigator, and I work full time. I work over full time. I have a very busy practice, and this is something that's coming kind of secondary to a need that we have within our family and for this new community that we're a part of. And so I have a handful of volunteers. It's actually a large group of women that are close to me who have offered to send thank you cards to help me with different ideas on fundraising efforts, to put together kind of local fundraising events. But if there's anyone that has any ideas on how we help raise awareness, how we could do this better, how we could do this more effectively, if there's anyone that you have a connection to that you think should hear about our story, please share it or have them reach out to me, and I'm happy to share it. I just want all of the information that we can get in order to move this forward as quickly as possible, because this disorder, it is unique, and you can see, a more detailed informational video about it on our website. But it's one of those things where, like, if you look at Loic right now, and I hope that you all go look at his picture because he's an adorable little boy, but you would not know that he has a disability or a disorder. He looks like any other 3-year-old. But over time, this is slowly going to steal that away. And I often describe it as like ALS for babies, right? It's one of those things. ALS is we've identified with it, within our culture, because it's something that became very widespread with the ALS challenge. And so it's easy to kind of picture what that might look like. And that's what it looks like for a lot of these children. So if you know someone that could benefit from what we're doing, or if you have any ideas on how we could do it better and more quickly, we have a very unique need with a very kind of high budget raise over the next 2 to 3 years. I'm happy to hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes I always tell people, if you can't give money, what can you give of yourself, right? And like you said, maybe it's writing thank you cards. Maybe it's databasing for you guys. Maybe I know I have a lot of you women here who have huge followings. So pushing out the following, pushing out the donate button, that makes a difference too. So I have a nonprofit as well. And a lot of times people say, oh, I just don't have the money to give. And I'm like, yeah, but what else could you give to us? Your expertise, your time. So I always tell people, don't count it out, because if you can't give that amount of money, there's something else that you can give us, because nonprofits can't exist without the volunteers and the help that is brought in. So for those of you who are thinking about this, and once again, you can reach out to Sherine and say, hey, I'd love to see how I can support. Because as many of us women know on this She CEO show, we are full-time working moms, and we are trying to balance life. And of course, Sherine, you're trying to balance something even more. You're balancing your son who's dealing with this disease, plus a foundation that you're working to find that cure, and you're working full-time. So you need as many people surrounding you as possible. So I'm just so thankful that we could get on here. We're going to, Shelby and I are going to continue to work with Sherine to get this message out and continue to reach as many people as we can. But knowing the reach of this podcast, I hope each one of you will share it and reshare it again. And like I said, if for some reason you can't get in contact with Sherine, message me. I'll connect you guys up. But thank you so much for being on the show and sharing your story and your message, Sherine. And we're going to make sure to get that out today. And for those of you listening, like I said, we'll have all the information actually in the bottom of the podcast, where all those notes are, so you can get those active links. But as I always say, live, love, laugh, and always be your authentic self.
Thanks for listening to Lead and Empower Her with your host, Dr. Julie Ducharme. Please leave your feedback and visit strategicadvisorboard.com to get the latest and greatest business advisement on the planet. Follow us on social media for updates, and we'll see you on the next episode.